Who are you? And where are you going? What do you want?
Hello and welcome to People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and I'm here every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time to talk about job hunting, starting and building a business, and building wealth. And so today I'm going to be talking about whether you should outsource or do things yourself, right? This is the constant dilemma in which we find ourselves, right? Should we just do everything ourselves because it costs money to hire someone else to do it at least in most cases, or do we make the investment in bringing someone else in to do certain things and pay that price, but hopefully live a more productive, a more financially successful life, or just a easier life as a result of having other people do things for us. So in thinking about the topic for today's show, so I basically broke down situations into three categories. And those categories are basically, these are the things you should pay for help. These are the things where it depends on the situation. And these are the things where under 99% of the circumstances, you should not pay for help. Okay. And so I'm just going to go through these. This is not an exhaustive list. It's to give you some food for thought as you consider this particular issue in your life. Now you may say, well, it's not relevant to me. I don't make enough money to hire people. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of the hiring we do isn't actually hiring people. It's subscriptions and things like that. As I'll get into, as the show moves on. And so, even if you're thinking of yourself as, well, I'm not, I don't make enough money, I'm not wealthy enough to hire a bunch of staff. This issue is still, it's relevant to all of our lives, is really what it comes down to. Okay, so let's start with the categories where you probably should be looking to offload them and get someone else or something else to do it. Okay, so the first thing is sort of low leverage tasks, whether it's in our business or our professional lives. So this is time consuming work. It's repetitive. It is not doesn't require skill, or at least any appreciable degree of skill. So these are the kind of things we want to take off our shoulders so that we can focus on higher value activities. So it could be something as simple as cleaning our house or apartment. It could be the kind of admin work that we have for our business, filing papers, or even keeping our online files straightened out. Okay, it could be tech support and anything of an administrative nature. We want to first of all, the first thing to do is consider, or to think about, does this really even need to be done at all? Because a lot of administrative work is actually busy work, and it can and you can dispense with it, and that will not negatively impact your life. In fact, it will probably positively impact your life. So a lot of what secretaries used to do, I know we don't use that word very much anymore, but that's why I'm using it here, because now they call them, we call them administrative assistants or whatever. A lot of what that person used to do is make sure that, pardon me. So a lot of what a secretary used to do is make sure that we're getting done the tasks that we need to get done, that we're focused on the most important tasks. Okay, they would They basically would help us keep on track. Well, today, an app as simple as Apple Reminders can do that, and in many ways can do it more effectively than a secretary has. So if you were to able to see my desktop, you would see right here on this side, I have Apple Reminders, and I have my reminders separated into one, two, three, four. I don't know. It looks like about 12 to 15 lists, and within them, there's a total of 173 tasks. Like, oh my gosh. Okay, but these are tasks not to do every day. Some of them are tasks that are repeated daily. Some of them are repeated every weekday. Some of them are repeated monthly or quarterly. Some of them come up just once a year. Okay, so for example, I have a reminder to put out my flag on Labor Day and take it back in the evening. So that's two of them, right? Not a big deal, but it's something that it's important for me to do, to take a minute to mark the day, and so I put a reminder in it. To pay an administrative assistant or secretary to remind me of that is a needless expense. On the other hand, I don't want to forget doing it. And what I found is when I just rely on my memory, I forget to do it. And I don't want to have someone else do it because I want to take that moment to mark a particular important holiday, right? So, but the reality is a tool like reminders is so efficient at helping us keep on track because I can set priorities for tasks, high, medium, low. Okay. And as I look at my calendar at this moment, I have no high priority tasks. I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I have 10 medium priority tasks. And then another, I guess it's not 10. I've got 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 9 medium priority tasks and 6 low priority tasks, right? And that way I can keep on track and I know which are more important than the others. Also, when I need to take a little break and just sort of, you know, put my mind let my mind rest for a couple of minutes so then I can refocus on the next important matter, I can do one of the low priority tasks. Um, all of which are for my personal benefit. These aren't admin things. They're things I need to do. Uh, One of them is read a little bit of poetry just to focus me on things outside of what I normally am involved with. Um, so things like that. There's a couple of physical movement things that I do during the day. Again, as you may notice, I'm always standing up, right? So it's better to stand up than to be sitting down, but I tend to stand in one place for hours at a time, which is not particularly good. So I schedule in a couple of physical tasks to move myself, right? So, but the nice thing about reminders is it's essentially free. So by taking a few moments, each day to keep it up to date, I'm good to go. And I'm essentially delegating the task of keeping me on track to reminders. So it's not costing me anything while it is reducing the time I have to take to be sitting there thinking, okay, what do I need to do next? Wait, what has to be done today that's important, right? Don't have to waste time doing that. Okay. So so the first thing we want to think about is delegating, low value, low uh, um, knowledge type of tasks. Okay, so that's something we should pay for. On kind of the opposite end is we should pay for expertise when the stakes are high. So if we're dealing with a legal matter or our taxes or some kind of major business decision, okay, where if we make a mistake, the cost could be very high. So at that point, we definitely, again, want to pay for those tasks, okay, because it could cost us even more if we don't have that expertise. Okay. Now, obviously, hiring a lawyer or an accountant is much more expensive than, for example, hiring a VA, a virtual assistant, maybe to do some of the routine administrative tasks that we have. Okay. Uh, but the potential savings by having an expert advise us is so high, it's worth it to pay the lawyers or accountants fees. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why they get paid so much, is because their advice has value in terms of, in essence, saving us money down the road. So generally speaking, an accountant who's competent in filing taxes should be able to save you more in taxes than his fee costs in for preparing your tax return. Okay. And when you think about it, even if you're using some sort of software for preparing taxes, which a lot of accountants do as well, still you're not preparing tens, dozens, hundreds of tax returns each year. And so you are just not going to know as much about the ins and outs of tax preparation, tax planning, tax savings that an accountant will. And so it makes sense to have an accountant do that. Now you may say, well, I have very straightforward finances. I get my paycheck. I don't own a house. I just take the standard deduction. Okay, well, maybe in that case, you don't need, a CPA to prepare your taxes. That may be okay. But if you own a business, okay, even if it's a sole proprietorship where you're going to file a Schedule C, once your taxes are at that level, I strongly recommend you consider hiring an accountant, because again, that accountant will save you more money in taxes than the accountant is likely to cost you in fees. I know that's certainly the case with my accountant, and I've been doing this for literally decades. But he's been an accountant for a little bit longer than I've been a businessman, and he does accounting, tax preparation all the time, day in and day out. Whereas I don't engage with it that frequently. Okay, so you want to avoid costly errors. You want to identify hidden opportunities, and expert advice in high stakes decisions will help you do that. So that is another area where you should pay for help rather than do it yourself. Okay, and then finally, I mentioned this, I think, at the beginning. Look, the fact of the matter is, all in the end, all we have is time. Okay, we have a limited amount of time in this world. Okay, something like I don't know, between maybe 80 and 100 years these days. It seems like people are living longer. Okay, and so how we use that time is one of the most crucial decisions we can make. So, in a situation where the cost to buy help is less than what we could earn in the same amount of time it would take us to perform that task, that's when we should probably be looking to pay someone to do it. Now, this is where it can get a little bit difficult, because you may be able to do a task and it takes you 15 minutes, okay? Or let's use a different example. Let's say half an hour. There's a task you can do. It takes you a half an hour. Okay, and let's say that you earn $100,000 a year, which is about $2,000 a week. Okay, and let's just take a simple example. You work uh, 50 hours a week. Okay, and so at $2,000 a week, okay, you're making $40 an hour. So if a task takes you a half an hour, okay, in that same half an hour, you can earn $20. Okay. So the question of whether you should then get someone else to take care of that task depends on how quickly can they do it and how much do they charge. Okay. So if if it costs you $15 an hour to hire someone and it takes them 45 minutes to do the task, okay, so that's 3/4 of an hour. So 3/4 of 15 is 750, 1050, $11.25. So even though it takes them longer, the cost is only $11.25. Whereas while you can do it in less time, 30 minutes rather than 45, 30 minutes of your time is worth $20. So even though it would take someone you hire less time to do it, the cost is roughly half of what you could earn in the same time period. So you should probably, hire someone to take care of that task. Okay. Now, if it would take someone else, let's say you have someone who, again, you're paying them $15 an hour, and let's say that it would take them an hour and a half to do the task that you can do in a half an hour. So again, half an hour of your time, $20, an hour and a half at $15 an hour is $22.50. Okay. So now it doesn't make sense to get help to do that task because the cost to do the task is higher than you could do it yourself. Okay. Now it's pretty close. It's only a little bit more expensive. And you may decide, well, maybe it takes them an hour and a half for the first couple of times they do it, but long term, they're going to reduce the time it takes them. And so I know I'm going to have to invest a little bit extra up front, but over the long term, the cost for me to have someone do this task is going to be lower than what I could earn in that time. And if that's the case, then looking at a longer time frame, it still makes sense to get someone to do the task. Okay, so we don't want to necessarily look at these issues in isolation, like what will it cost just the first time I have it done, but sometimes it takes people time to get up to speed. The other sort of fallacy in this is, well, since I would have to train the person and that takes my time, I'm not going to train the person. I don't want to take my time. I'm just going to keep doing it. The problem with that is eventually we've got more than we can do. Okay. So oftentimes we will have to invest some of our time, which means our costs will go up a little bit in transferring a particular task to someone else. Okay. But in the long run, that's better. Why is it better? Because number one, we're going to take that task off our plate. Number two, we're going to learn how to delegate and how to delegate ever more efficiently. Right. And that's a very important skill for all of us to learn. Okay. So I'm trying to think of an example of working with one of my colleagues yesterday. An issue came up, and she asked me, how should I handle this? And I said, well, what do you think? And she said, well, X, Y, and Z. And we went through it. We spent probably about 15 or 20 minutes discussing the issue until she got to the point where she felt she had a good resolution for it. And then I explained to her, my goal is for you to be comfortable making these kind of decisions yourself without my intervention. Because as you see, you knew more about the issues than I did. You're in a better place to make the decision. Okay. And so it's not a good use of my time for her to relate all the information to me, for me to make the decision, and then she goes and executes the decision. She already has all the information. What I need to do is help her gain the confidence that how she thinks matters through is absolutely appropriate. And so then she can work more efficiently and I can work more efficiently, right? So these are the kind of factors we should look at when the sort of the bias, if you will, is toward getting someone to help with a particular task. Okay. So those are when you should pay for help. That's the first category. Okay, let's take a break. When life brings unexpected changes, managing inherited property shouldn't add to your stress. Magnum Properties specializes in probate and trust real estate management. We handle the complexities while you focus on what matters most. From property maintenance to tenant relations, from legal compliance to maximizing value, we're your trusted partner through every step. Magnum Properties Inc., turning property challenges into peace of mind. Call us today at 213 264 4396 or visit magnumprops.com. Okay, this is People Making Money, and I'm your host Kevin Bemmel, and we're talking about when you should outsource and when you should do tasks yourself. And so I started out by talking about situations where almost for sure you should pay for help. So when it's very low value, administrative, low expertise type tasks, those you should, do your best to offload onto either an app or someone to help you. And then the flip side is when there's very high stakes, okay, where making a mistake could be very costly. Again, you want to hire help to help you make that decision, to advise you make that decision. And the general principle is if the cost of hiring someone to do a task is less than the cost for you to do the task, then you should outsource it. Okay. While keeping in mind that initially the cost to outsource may be higher. Okay. But as long as over the long run and after a sort of break-in period or transition period, it'll be less costly. That's really what's important. Okay. So now let's look at the next category. So the next category is it depends on the situation. So let's talk more in a business context here. So let's say you're working on your business and you're looking to grow it quickly, scale it up, or launch a new venture. So hiring people may be the only way to be able to do that. Okay. So the question then comes down to is by hiring a lot of people, what will the cost of that be relative to what you would expect the return on that larger cost, that larger investment be? Okay. So let's say that you're currently um, uh, your the return the percentage return on your business is let's say it's 10%. Okay. And when I say 10% on the capital invested, et cetera, return on assets, if you will. Okay. 10%. Or we could also look at it from the standpoint of um, 10% of your revenue ends up being profit. Let's look at it that way. That's a little clearer. Okay. So let's say right now, out of your gross revenue, 10% flows through the bottom line after all expenses. Okay. And let's say you want to enlarge your business, which is going to require hiring a lot more people. Okay. So you're going to be expanding your personnel cost. Maybe you're going to have to get more space. There's going to be more equipment necessary depending on what the business is, et cetera. Okay. So let's say that your costs are going to double. All right. So let's take a business that currently is making $1 million, and we said that it has a 10% of the gross revenue flows through to profits. That means the $10 million in revenue, $900,000 in expenses, $100,000 in profit. All right. And now the business wants to scale up. So in order to do that, let's say it needs to take on another $400,000 in expenses for personnel, et cetera. Okay, so now expenses are $1.3 million. Obviously, if revenue stays at $1 million, okay, now the business is going to be losing $300,000 a year. So your return on investment basically is negative. Okay, so in order for that $400,000 investment to be worthwhile, okay, minimally, right, revenue is going to have to go up to $1.4 million. However, if it only goes up to $1.4 million, you're still making $100,000 in profit a year, but now that $100,000 is roughly 7% of revenue, not 10% of revenue. Okay, so your return has gone down. So in order to keep your return on investment the same as it was before, okay, your revenue would actually have to increase to $1,430,000. Okay, so at $1,430,000, expenses of $1.3 million. So now you have a profit of $130,000. Well, actually, it's got to be, I'm sorry, it's got to be a little bit more than that. It's got to be about, I'm trying to do the math in my head. It's going to have to be about $1,500,000. No, it's going to be 200,000. So about $1,470,000, 460, somewhere around in there. Yeah, about a million. Let's see, 3, 4. Yeah, 1,470,000. Okay, so your revenue is going to have to increase to $1,470,000. Okay, if you subtract $1,300,000 from that, so now your profit is about $170,000. Oops, no, see, I still did it too high. Why am I off here? 1,000,000, 1,430,000, 1,440,000. 50. Okay, yeah. Okay, so your revenue needs to be about $1,450,000. Okay, so if you have revenue of $1,450,000, you subtract $1,300,000 from that. Your profit is about $150,000, which is pretty close to 10%. Okay, so to a certain extent, your return on investment hasn't gone up any. You're still at a 10% return on investment. You are making a little bit more than before. You're making $50,000 in additional profit, but your business has not become any more profitable. The rate of profit is still the same. So if you're going to increase your expenses by $400,000, you can see that you probably need to increase your revenue by at least $500,000 to really get a higher profitability out of the business. Okay, and so that's why it depends on the situation, right? Do you really think you're going to be able to increase your revenue by 50%, even though you're increasing your expenses by only about 44%? Okay. You say, wait, I should just be able to increase my revenue by 44%. No, it doesn't. It just doesn't. The math doesn't work out that way. Okay. So this is where it really just depends on the situation. Is there demand for your product and services? How quickly will you be able to take advantage of that demand, right? And how quickly after you hire new people will they get up to speed and become productive, right? All it's hard to say. It's all going to be in the end. It's going to be a judgment call, and sometimes you're going to make the right call, and sometimes you're not going to make the right call. Okay, so that a situation like that where you're looking, for example, to scale your business, that depends on the details of the market climate, the economy, your specific business, and the people that you hire. Okay, so that's one situation. That's a situation where it depends. Okay, another one is where you're paying for peace of mind. Okay, so some services are not going to generate wealth directly, nor are they necessarily going to um, prevent you from making a very bad decision. So, for example, when I was talking in the first category about hiring an accountant to do your taxes, well, in most cases, that accountant's fee is going to be, in essence, returned to you by what the accountant saves you in taxes. Okay. So, although the accountant isn't really making you any money per se, they're really not costing you any money either, because of the savings they generate. But let's take in a situation where maybe you pay for an insurance broker services, right? So, um, in many cases, the broker is not going to get you a lower premium on your insurance, especially if you live in California these days. Lower premiums are virtually impossible to find. Okay, but what you are doing, hopefully, in working with an insurance professional, is working with someone who can give you peace of mind, reduce the sense of the risks that you may have in life. And so you'll sleep better. You'll be able to focus better on your business and your family. Okay, so in that case, although you're not really going to be saving any money, okay, it may still be worthwhile because your overall life will be better. And that really is going to come down to a pretty personal decision. So it's not clear cut at all. It has to do with how much risk you can comfortably tolerate. It has to do with how much knowledge you have about the particular area, um, for which you're thinking about hiring some expertise, financial planning, security, again, insurance, right? These kinds of things. Some of us have a lot of expertise, even though we may not do them professionally, and others, less so. And so, um, having the emotional well-being, having a sense that you're managing risk well, that you may value that more than the cost for, in essence, outsourcing these decisions, or at least these processes. And if that's the case, then it may make sense for you to outsource them, but it's going to be situation dependent. Okay. So, again, this is in the gray area between the two categories I'm talking about, and you'll have to decide. Okay. All right. And then the third one is the cost to is whether you want to bear the cost to develop your own skills versus outsourcing them. Okay. And this may seem like a, solely a professional issue, but it can be relevant to our personal lives as well. So, I I believe that the best investments we can make are the investments we make in ourselves. Okay, we should always be learning, and not just business or professional related skills. We should be learning more about how to have good relationships. We should be learning more about how to live a healthy life. We should be learning more about how to connect with God. All of these things are important. And we can't outsource those. We can't outsource learning to other people. So we've got to strike a balance between the time we take for doing the learning ourselves that enhances us as a human being, and a parent, a spouse, a friend, um, and a professional or a businessman, versus other areas where it's not efficient for us to learn how to do things. So I'll give you a few examples. When I was a kid, we had a Rambler station wagon. I loved that car. So did my dad. And my dad did almost all the routine maintenance on that car, and I helped him. And we could. We changed the oil, we changed spark plugs, we changed the brake pads one time. Okay, we did a lot of work on that car. Now, this was in the 1960s, and engines were much simpler than they are today. And there was a lot more room for working under the hood and all those kind of things. The tools to do so were fairly simple. And so we could do it. And it was an opportunity for my dad to spend time with me, for me to learn things from my dad. I think from my dad's standpoint, to learn something that men ought to know, these kind of things. And it was really good. And even though it may have been less expensive for my dad to have a mechanic service the car, uh, I think he made the right decision in not outsourcing it because of how it helped us build our relationship. Okay, but today, if I had a son, which I don't, I would not, you know, do automobile maintenance with my son. Cars are way too complicated, far too difficult to work on, under the hood, so to speak. The tools for doing so are very expensive, very complex, computers, all this kind of stuff. I'm just not it, and it, there's for me to learn how to do it, it's far too much time. It's especially for what I could how I and my son that I don't have, could benefit from it. Or if my daughter were interested in learning such things, which I don't think she is, right? It's not good. There's no concurrent benefit there for doing that. Okay. The flip side is where it does make sense for me to invest in my own education is in learning how to use large language models, so-called AIs, whether it's ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude. Okay, I use all three of those from time to time because they all seem to have kind of their areas where they're best. And this is something that's important because it is rapidly becoming such a critical productivity tool in business, but also in personal life. Okay. So, what it allows me to learn and how quickly I can learn it, okay, is a big benefit to me when I'm faced with a situation, be it professional or personal, where I don't know the answer to something, and having the answer quickly could be a big benefit. Okay, so it does not make sense for me to outsource use of AI to someone else. Okay, this is something I need to invest in myself in learning. Now, once I learn how to use it effectively, then I can outsource its use to other people. And I'll give you an example. I was in a meeting yesterday talking with a group of people, and one of the people wanted to, perform a particular task, and we were talking about how best to do it. And one of the people in the meeting said, "You know what? Here's the best way to do it. Go on Chat GPT and ask them the following question, and that will give you the answer." Right? And he knew that because he's been engaged. It was my friend Bill Gross. He can say that because, like me, Bill has been engaged in learning the power of large language models, right? And we talk about it on a pretty regular basis, the kind of tasks that we're doing, activities we're doing, and how they work and don't work, and that kind of thing. And so we are now beginning to get to the point where, having learned enough about it, we can start outsourcing the use of AI, and it makes us more efficient, and it makes the people with whom we're dealing more efficient as well. And it makes them more autonomous, which is good, right? Autonomy is a good thing, right? The more we can empower the people with whom we work or with whom we have relationships, generally speaking, the better that is, right? Because then they can get their whatever done, and there's more time for us all to be together and talk about and work on important issues, important matters. That's what I mean by autonomy is good, right? Autonomy in sort of getting the tasks of life done, that's good, right? And then we can come together and work on the real important aspects of life, be it personal or professional. So investing in skill development versus outsourcing, that's again, situation dependent question. And we have to consider, well, what are the pros and cons, and then make the best decision that we can. Okay. Two more things I want to talk about, and these are in the category of when you should not pay for help. Okay. So, first of all, don't pay for help that you will not use. Okay. Now, we see this a lot when we're hiring non people help. Okay. So, we have subscriptions to all kinds of things. Okay. And how many of them do we really use or use on a regular basis? Right. So, I was just talking about AI. If you have an AI subscription, are you really using it enough that it makes sense for you to be paying for a subscription to it? I know for myself, although occasionally I hit the limit on ChatGPT 4.0 usage, there's always a lower level ChatGPT LLM that I can use. And I can also switch to a different LLM. So I don't pay for any AI model usage. It's not a productive way for me to spend my money. I don't need it right now. And in fact, periodically I go through the various subscriptions that I have, and I think about, do I really need this? Okay, I did that most recently. It was like January, February, I think it was, and I realized I had two internet service. I mean, two Wi-Fi providers, and my cell phone provider was way too expensive, and I got rid of a subscription to another thing, and I realized I was spending a lot of money on subscriptions, and I wasn't using them, or at least wasn't using them at the level that it really made sense. Oh, so I had a subscription to Sling for many years. And the reason really was because I like watching old movies, and that was the only way I had access to Turner Classic Movies. So, and then I was in the hospital about a year ago, a little over a year ago now. And in the hospital, they had these. They were basically iPads, and I could watch. It was a service like Tubi. I forget what it's called now, but it's a free service. And I realized that I could see lots of old movies on a free service like Tubi, and I didn't need to be paying $50 or $60 a month, whatever Sling cost me. And so I got rid of it. And frankly, I found Turner Classic Movies kind of annoying because the main host likes to espouse his politics, and I don't want to hear about politics when I want to watch an old movie. I just want to watch an old movie and enjoy it. So my leisure time, I don't want to be dealing with business. I don't want to be dealing with politics. I just want to enjoy, right? So I got rid of that service because and what I did was I put it on pause for 3 months to see if I missed it, and I didn't. So then I just canceled it, right? So there's lots of ways that we're paying for help, especially like I said with these subscriptions, that where it's really not an economic decision to do so. And now before I sign up for any kind of subscription service, I give it a lot of thought, and then periodically I go through my credit card bill and I look, what am I paying for? Do I still need these things? Although now the number is so small that I think there's only about four or something that I pay for, right? And whether it's streaming services or whatever, like my friends keep asking me, oh, have you seen such and such? No. Oh, it's on Netflix. I don't have Netflix. Oh, you got to get Netflix, right? But then the next thing they tell me about, I've got to get, some other streaming service to watch it. It's like, I don't want I don't want to pay for streaming services. First of all, I don't watch enough media to make it uh, economic, and second of all, I don't want to bear the expense, and I don't want to feel compelled to watch a bunch of stuff because I'm spending money on it, right? So um, don't pay for what you won't use. Okay, that's number one. And then the last thing is, don't pay for what amounts to status driven delegation, right? So here in Los Angeles, I live in West LA, just south of Beverly Hills, right? It's a pretty, wealthy area in which to live. And when I go to the dry cleaners, I go to my cleaners, I would say about half the people who show up there are personal assistants, right? they're picking up and dropping off the clothes for somebody else. And I'm always curious. I've never done this because it's none of my business, but I want to ask them, who do you work for and how much do they really make? Okay. Because I know for myself, and I can't possibly afford, whatever it costs, $50,000 a year for a professional assistant. And even if I could, I wouldn't pay it because I would be struggling for ways to really have that person be productive, right? Yes, it takes me an hour and a half to go to my cleaners because I go to a cleaners that's not particularly close to my house. But one of the reasons I go there is because the woman who owns the cleaners and I are friends. It gives us a chance to talk and catch up. I only go once a month. And so it's a break in my day. It's down in Santa Monica, so I get to see the ocean while I'm there. And so it's kind of a pleasant interlude that I do one Friday morning a month. Okay. So I think we really want to be careful about expenses that are really more like vanity expenses than they are, or vanity outsourcing, we'll call it, than they are really justified. Look, if you're making $1 million a year, okay, so you are going to hire a personal assistant. They're going to run all kinds of chores. They're going to do your grocery shopping. They're going to pick up your dry cleaning. They're going to, I don't know, keep your workspace organized. Maybe they're going to pick up your children from school, although I personally think that's a bad idea. I think no matter how successful parents are, they should be picking up their children from school. But you may choose to do that, and there may be enough for them to do that it's worthwhile for them to do it. And clearly, if you're making $1 million a year, right? So $1 million divided by 10 is $100,000. You're making $20,000 a week. Okay, so you're making around $400 an hour. Okay, so to pay someone what amounts to what, $20 an hour to do stuff that it's a 5% of your income. Okay, so even if they're sitting around for a certain amount of time, each day, maybe that's fine because it gives you peace of mind to know that there's someone there who can, oh, I need you to take care of this, please go do it, kind of thing. Okay, but that's somebody who's very, making a lot of money and can afford to do that. For most of us, we can't. Even VAs, okay, we think of them and they're very, and there are inexpensive VAs. You can hire them in, the Philippines or Bangladesh or whatever. They work for a lot less money than someone in the United States would. Still, I think the ratio of cost for the VA to what you make has to be pretty high if they're hired on a full-time basis. Now, if they're hired on a task basis, then that's probably fine. But to have that kind of full-time help, it can very quickly end up being an inefficient use of resources. Okay, so those are my thoughts on outsourcing versus do it yourself. Again, the three categories: where you should pay for help, where it's situation dependent, and where you should not pay for help. Start out by figuring out into which category a particular issue may fall, and then work from there to figure it out. So I thank you very much for joining me today. Always a pleasure, especially to see my live viewers. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific time is my show, Jiggers' Place. We'll have a cocktail and a schmooze as we head toward the end of the week. And then next week on Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time is my show, Trusts and Estates Weekly. On Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time is my show, Business Lessons from the Military. And then a week from today, I'll be back for the next edition of People Making Money. So again, thanks so much. Would love to hear, by the way, your comments, thoughts on this subject. All the links to my social media will be in the show notes when it posts on YouTube. And if you like the show, I'd sure appreciate it if you would tell a friend or family member about it. and maybe they'll find something to benefit them as well. And I really would appreciate if you help spread the word. So thanks again for watching or listening. Wishing you a wonderful rest of the day, and signing off as I always do. Marie, darling, you are my belle.